Sound of the Cicadas was a fascinating documentary about the mortician Dale Carter. It was so fascinating because it was, it explores this world that we avoid as human beings. Like, we don't want to think about death. We don't want to know anything about death, and it's something that's hidden in our society. But it's super fascinating to learn the ins and outs of, and to meet the people who have made this their life. I think Dale is such a great character to base a documentary on. He's so strange. He's got all these very creepy fascinations himself, and yet he is just like you and I. I loved hearing about him shopping at Skulls Unlimited and being a collector of all these strange things, and also his mindset when meeting people, when he talked about seeing everybody as a potential customer and viewing people as bodies to be embalmed. I thought that was really, really creepy, but the way he talked about it in such a matter-of-fact way, he's right. He just sees it as a job, and I thought that was really funny and really interesting to explore as to explore him as a character. I thought, he was just super interesting. I also enjoyed that the documentary went into his other passions in restoring things other than bodies, like the Carolyn Henshey Gilbert house, and his passions with that. And also, going through such loss when that house was vandalized, and then his Galveston house burning down, like following this man as he experiences this loss of everything that he's restored. And as a collector, it's one of the worst things that can happen, is to have all your collections burn away. And I liked the message of this documentary about how life is so short, and to make as much as you can out of the life that you have, because it's short. And I think that Dale experiencing these losses really sort of emphasized that message of how everything is temporary, and to truly make the most out of what you have now in the moment. So yeah, and I also really liked that it explored the COVID pandemic at the end, and how it was similar to AIDS and any epidemic where people are scared to care for the bodies, and Dale was one of the people that stepped up and helped during the pandemic. So I thought that was really cool as well. So yeah, overall, really, really interesting documentary. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
Song of the Cicada was really interesting. We meet this mortician, Dale Carter, and he goes through his life and the process of embalming, and these ideas of life and death, and kind of how that circles into the life and death of a cicada, and how it's still there but it's not, like the shell and stuff. I think it's really interesting. I think there are a lot of really intimate tidbits into not only Dale's life, but also, the process, the activities of being a mortician, and embalming, and life and death, and dealing with that, and grief. And I think it's all portrayed in this really moving and really natural progression of events throughout this documentary. I think he did a great job of scoring this piece to make it logically flow, and really highlight these emotional moments throughout the piece, and just make it, a very touching look at this person, but also these ideas surrounding death, which can be really, really touch and go depending on the way you tell it. But it was really endearing, and overall, really, really well done piece.
I absolutely love this film. It was a joy to watch. This man is so positive despite everything he's gone through. Someone robbing and breaking apart windows in one of his houses in Galveston, and then his house catching on fire in another, and he's still positive about it and lives life to the best. He's kind of the example that we should all live. Maybe not to the full eccentricity, but even that. Being eccentric is who he is, and you can accept that. He's positive. He's happy with who he is. He knows some of his stuff creeps people out, especially his sister, and he doesn't care. It's who he is. And he's kind of how we should all be. We should all be happy to be who we are as long as we're not physically hurting anyone. And this man is particularly making people happy. He's well, probably not really happy because it is death he's dealing with, but he's giving people something nice to look at before they lay their loved ones to rest. He does things that he's supposed to do. It's an amazing film to watch and it should be shown. It also had beautiful cinematography of the Galveston area.
All right, I just finished watching Song of the Cicada, which I thought was a really great documentary film, particularly because Dale, I believe, was such a fascinating figure. I enjoy watching interesting characters, and I feel like Dale, with his background as a mortician, was really an interesting character and really reflected a sense of humanity and sensitivity towards the concept of death and grief that I thought was quite profound and quite inspirational, especially since it's a subject in which most people try to avoid for as much as possible and are usually overwhelmed when it comes upon them suddenly and require people like Dale to handhold them through the process. And I felt like Dale was interesting not just in that space, but in his interests outside that space, and sort of reflected a sense of self and a sense of identity that was quite endearing. I felt like his closing ideas about not wanting to be seen as a victim, but rather as a survivor, was really a big concept that was couched in a theme that it revolves around death and sort of the finality of death and sort of how you feel about the spiritual intent of living and dying and whatever comes afterwards. And I felt like this piece had a really great spiritual ethereal feel to it that was quite compassionate and quite human and works for a wide audience and really reflects a level of heart that I thought came through quite well. So I enjoyed the piece, thought it was very well done, and thought Dale was quite fascinating. So an excellent piece all the way around.
Despite being so much about death, Song of the Cicada is actually incredibly life-affirming. One of the main points of the film is that in order to truly be alive, you need to face and embrace death. And this seems to be at the root of all Dale's eccentricities, because he spent so much of his life dealing with death, he's kind of come to accept it, and then to be able to enjoy life to the fullest in whatever weird ways that might interest him. His passion for life, I think, is really infectious and it's really heartwarming. And the proximity to death has clearly given him a lot to think about, a lot of wisdom, because the film was littered with these little sort of rather profound ideas, stuff like people make a god out of what they fear, and if you restore something, it restores you, which they're really interesting. They're things that I'm still thinking about, so that's really cool, and it kind of really makes you reflect on your own attitudes to death and how maybe they're holding you back from how to live and from living your life to the fullest. And the parts like during the COVID pandemic, when he mentions, he's worked on lots of COVID bodies, but other people are afraid to, and that was the same back in AIDS. He was working on lots of bodies of people who died of AIDS, but nobody else wanted to touch them. And it just kind of goes to show you that when you can't accept your own mortality, it actually cuts you off from life and from other people, from being able to help them. And that's why Dale rails so much against, the death denying culture that we live in, because it separates us from life, from other people, and makes us, not want to help them. And he's got this. He says this thing like, his work has given him like a sympathy for the world, which is really interesting because exactly like that sympathy is what we seem to be lacking, and it's our fear of death that has made us that way. So basically, the film is almost like showing you how to be a better person, which is great.
This film is called Song of the Cicada. This was a fabulous doc feature. We are privileged to meet Texas mortician Dale Carter. I really enjoyed all his interviews as he explains his passion for his vocation and his respect for the dead. I also enjoyed the footage of his collections of all sorts of wonderful objects and his work on historical homes. He has a great sense of humor, and the film really captures that. I was fascinated by his discussions and demonstrations of embalming. I love the sentimental soundtrack of the piano and other classical instruments and the drone footage of Galveston and the beach. The film deals with the concept of death in such a sensitive way. As Dale admits, a lot of people are often nervous about death, but this film breaks the topic wide open. Excellent work.
Hi, these are my thoughts on Song of the Cicada. This was a really charming feature. I think that the lead and the subject, they couldn't have had a more endearing individual to watch. Just really captivating and very charming to see him on screen. Also, I'm from Texas. My family's from Texas. And there were so many things about like Beaumont in particular, which is where we're from, that I didn't know, that I learned about throughout watching, which was really refreshing. And you can tell there was a lot of research that went into just like making sure that these places were painted in the best light and the most truthful light possible. And I thought that was really beautiful. I also love how the themes carried through the visuals. The mortician keeps talking about, we live in a death-phobic society. And I loved how the visuals and the inserts weren't really afraid to shy away from exploring that theme in every possible way. So you have the illustrations from like the 17th and 18th century, like 1800s, and getting all the different skulls from inside of Dale's house and cycling those through. I think that was really captivating to watch and definitely kept you on your toes as a viewer. And just spending time, I think they captured a lot of really great organic moments, from like Dale to his assistant and his encounters with the tour group, and just so many different isms and sayings. Like, I think there was so much. It was very natural and easy, but also really fascinating to watch. I really enjoyed